else, spirituality can be full of ego. We
Yeah.
can all have ego in anything. Spirituality has a shadow, it's full of ego. Um, so I wanted to discuss this because you know how important spirituality is to Millie and I. And I thought it would be great to acknowledge that some people feel this way and to discuss why. And maybe we don't need to change anybody's mind, but maybe we can bring a different viewpoint into this, have a different conversation around it. But first, we're going to talk about the astrology that's happening now that might support this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important to understand the astrology right now because it does give context to the egoic part that is in fact I would say that is in fact attempting to die. And I say that because we can see out in the world a lot of how an old way of being, we're trying to grip onto it. We're
Mm-hmm.
trying to grip on an old way of being, an old way of living life, an old way of running institutions, running countries, democracy. And there's this very now outdated way that people are no longer resonating with. And I believe that that has a lot to do with the fact that more and more people are actually getting in touch with their spirituality, they're elevating consciousness. But I don't think that a lot of people have the words for that yet. But that's an exciting thing that you can see, that you can sense it. People are asking different questions, but they don't have the words for it yet. And so that part right there is so important. That part where people are at, where they feel differently, where they feel disconnected from an old way that is trying to be held on to, that's such a sensitive point in someone's evolution, spiritual evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So when we are in a space of egoic spirituality, it's a little scary because it can become another egoic construct.
Mm-hmm.
So currently, we're recording this on November 12th, and we are 5 days away, no, 7 days away, excuse me, from Pluto finally leaving the sign of Capricorn and moving into the sign of Aquarius.
Thank God.
Yes. And Pluto in Capricorn has represented so much of what has been created over the last 16, 20 years, 16 to 20 years, I would say. A lot of it has been a growth of corporation. It has been a growth of people venturing out on themselves, out for themselves, people creating businesses, being industrious. um, if we're looking at this from a very practical perspective, it was people trying to make something of life, something of their material life, in order to gain some kind of um, material security, right? And
Mm-hmm.
in the collective, that was a very strong belief. That was like the tried and true belief. That was like the map of that you followed in order to be considered successful. Only two over the last 4 years for that to come crumbling down, because Pluto represents the shadow of anything it builds, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I say that because Pluto isn't just the shadow. Pluto is the empowerment that comes deep from within us when we take a moment to look deeply within ourselves and integrate the light and the shadow. And that, the way that I'm saying it feels so simplistic, but it's anything but, right? It's an ongoing, it's a lifelong journey, really. So I think one of the things that Pluto represents is the impermanence of things, the
Mm-hmm.
impermanence of life. And so when things are impermanent and we can remember that, then if we can accept that as a fact, as a truth of life, then we don't grip onto anything in the same way, but we hold it with a different reverence on a day to day. So that part right there is, as we move into Pluto and Aquarius, pop astrology is really focusing on like AI and robots and technology. And yes, we're going to see that. We're absolutely going to see that. What that's going to look like, I have no idea. My brain can't fathom. And to be quite honest, it's not something I concern myself with very much, right? It's not that it's not important, but I don't think about it. It's going to be what it's going to be. But on a personal level, Pluto in Aquarius is, what is the empowerment of questioning? How are you empowered by questioning the things that have built your life thus far, the constructs that you have built your life from thus far? How are you empowered to tap into the essence of who you are and show up genuinely in your life day to day and from that space? How are you empowered to live your life in accordance to what feels the most authentic to you? So I break it down in this way because this is what, to me, this is one of the components of spirituality, to be present enough with everything, to be present enough with everything that is falling apart, and recognizing how difficult that in fact is, right? What parts of us are being shed with that, but what is asking to be reborn? What is asking to come from us in a different way? And I bring it in this way because this to me feels like a much more honest expression of the Pluto transit that we're experiencing. And Pluto at its last leg of Capricorn, I would say this has been an ongoing feeling, definitely through the month of partly September, October, November, of death. There has been a feeling of death, whether it's you've had thoughts about death, or you can understand, oh, that career is dying, that relationship is dying, right? This place that I'm living in, like, that's dying. I'm transitioning onto something else. There is a theme of death that Pluto brings when it makes huge transitions. So this isn't just about like a sigh of relief. This is about being with the experience of the transformation that is actually happening within you and how fucked up that feels sometimes. It's not an easy feeling to move with.
No.
And to me, spirituality is the acknowledgement of those death and rebirth processes that we experience multiple times throughout our human lifetime. And this is one of those times. And so I'm personally spending a lot less time on social media, but whenever I go on there, the way that some of these things are portrayed is very superficial. And I think it doesn't do justice for the part of people that that is dying. There is something dying in all of us right now. It looks differently. We have different levels of attachment to the things that are dying, like, but there is that. And while there is something difficult about it, there's also something very sacred about it. And spirituality is about remembering, I think, that the sacredness in those, especially those moments. And I think that's where the astrology has us right now. This transition between Pluto, the last leg of Pluto, and then Pluto finally moving into Aquarius. It's that profound feeling of death. And now, another thing I'll say is Pluto moving into Aquarius isn't like this rejoicing, like, yeah, we're liberated.
No.
It's a rebirth. We will have to learn again to live. And that comes with its own soul journey. I hope I'm not too doom and gloom here. I just think that there is something so important about minding the process of who we become when we listen to things like astrological transits. It's one thing to know, yeah, Pluto's leaving Capricorn, moving into Aquarius. Venus is now in Capricorn. Like, okay, but what does that mean to you? How does that feel in your body? What are the thoughts that are coming up? What are the feelings that are coming up? How is your body responding on the day to day? And how do you hold yourself in a way that where you know you're not going to necessarily be debilitated by all of this, but you're absolutely honoring it? Yeah.
Well, from where I'm sitting, I don't think you sound doom and gloom, but I've walked through my own death process and rebirth. I've walked with Pluto my whole life and will continue to walk it during this life. Um, and I think it's our culture's unwillingness to
Yeah.
look at death, to look at shadow, to face difficult things, to face discomfort that has brought us to this point.
Mm-hmm.
We are built from an early age. It is, don't feel sad, don't be angry, don't feel this, don't feel that. I just spoke to someone in my neighborhood and he was like, yeah, we just can't get angry. I take medicine, so I'm not angry. And I'm like, that is not okay. Sorry. I just out there, I know that medicine can be helpful, but when we're taking medicine to suppress our natural response to something that feels dangerous or terrible, it's not okay. We need to have our feelings. Our feelings are wisdom. Our feelings are important. And I look at this man and having known him a bit, I'm like, but I can see your anger would be like this beautiful life energy. I'm not talking about violent anger. I'm talking about life energy that moves through you, that takes action. And this country has been, you can see the polarization of anger, the suppression of so much where we're not taking action, and then the overactive anger in another direction. And it's like, whoa. So when you're talking about confronting this stuff, I'm all about it. And I think it's time to be willing to walk through the darkness into the light. It's willing to confront our shadow. I think this is when we need to have deeper conversations and look at like, what am I avoiding? Because the collective doesn't change until we change on a personal level. And I remember, and how this translates on an individual level, you've said to some of this, but I remember going through my own death and rebirth, and I was suicidal at the time. And one of the hardest parts for me that I was navigating, and I bring this up also, what I want to say is I have heard several people say they don't want to be here or they want to die. And this has just been in the past week and a half, that there's something happening here. Just so I want to validate that what you're saying is happening in the astrology, and I'm hearing it. I'm hearing people feel the astrology. So going back to when I was suicidal, one of the things I really had to confront was the death of narratives about myself that weren't true. Death of shame-based narratives that I was taught, that I wasn't valuable, I was not lovable, I was ugly, I wasn't good, I was selfish. My goodness actually lived in my shadow. And it was so hard for me to believe that I was good. And I remember, and it sounds like, really? But living and believing in my goodness felt so dangerous. But part of my rebirth was, first of all, deciding, am I going to walk through this to the other side? Can I be here? Do I want to be here and walk through this? And I was like, yes. But I also had to embrace my goodness, and I had to start developing a relationship to it. And I think there are a lot of people that could probably resonate with that. I think a lot of goodness lives in the shadow. And I also want to normalize that sometimes you want to die. And our unwillingness to speak about death and our unwillingness to speak about wanting to die isolates us so much. It doesn't mean you want to kill yourself. It doesn't mean you actually are going to do something about it. Being able to say to somebody, I feel so bad, I want to die, and having the person listen and hold it and not panic is really important. We need to be able to say these things to each other and feel safe and loved and held. That's where transformation happens. And our refusal to look at it, our refusal to listen, our need to panic over all of this is keeping us stuck.
Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe button and hit that notification bell to be updated on new videos.
Click the video on screen to watch more episodes.